Somewhere in the rolling farmland outside Dover, Massachusetts, a small white house still stands on a quiet road where almost nobody stops. In 1948, 3 women heated that house through an entire New England winter, using nothing but sunlight and barrels of salt that cost less than a bag of groceries. No furnace, no gas line, and no monthly bill. The salt stored the sun during the day and released it back at night. And by the end of this video, you will discover exactly how to build that same system in your home for under $40 and why the heating industry spent 70 years making sure you never heard about it. I drove out to a farmstead in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania last fall because a retired mason named Gerald told me he had been heating his workshop with buckets of salt for 11 years. No propane, no electric heater, just 5-gallon buckets sealed tight, lined up along the south wall under a homemade solar air collector built from old storm windows and aluminum cans. I stood inside that workshop on a 38-degree morning and the thermometer on the wall read 67 degrees. Gerald opened one of those buckets and the salt inside was warm to the touch, not hot, warm, like a stone that had been sitting in the sun all afternoon. He told me he had not paid a single heating bill for that space since 2012. I asked him what was in the buckets. He said sodium sulfate, 10 water, a little borax. He said his grandmother's people in the old country used to pack it around root cellars. I asked him where he learned the mixture. He told me a woman at MIT figured it out before he was born, and then the gas companies made sure nobody remembered her name. I measured the surface temperature of those buckets myself. 61 degrees on the outside wall, 67 degrees ambient air. The workshop smelled like sawdust and old concrete. Everything about it felt ordinary, but what was happening inside those sealed buckets was not ordinary at all. It was phase change energy storage, and it is one of the most powerful and most deliberately forgotten heating technologies in American history. What Gerald built in his workshop, a retired woman in Hungary figured out nearly a century ago. And that story starts with a salt that was already famous 300 years before she was born. In 1625, a German-Dutch chemist named Johann Rudolf Glauber was working in his laboratory in Amsterdam when he isolated a crystalline compound from Hungarian spring water. He called it sal mirabilis, miraculous salt. It was sodium sulfate decahydrate, 10 molecules of water locked inside a crystal lattice. Glauber sold it as a laxative. It made him wealthy. But the property that matters to us is one he never fully understood. When you heat that salt to 89 degrees Fahrenheit, it melts. When it melts, it absorbs an enormous amount of thermal energy and holds it. When it cools back down below 89 degrees, it refreezes and releases all of that stored heat in a slow, steady wave. Scientists call this latent heat of fusion. The number is 254 kilojoules per kilogram. That is roughly 5 times the heat storage capacity of the same weight of water over the same temperature range. 300 years after Glauber, a physical chemist named Maria Telkes picked up exactly where he left off. Telkes was born in Budapest in 1900. She studied physical chemistry, earned her doctorate, and emigrated to America, where she became one of the most brilliant solar energy researchers of the 20th century. At MIT, her work on thermoelectric generators and solar distillation earned her a reputation that few of her male colleagues could match. They called her the Sun Queen. In 1947, she partnered with architect Eleanor Raymond and philanthropist Amelia Peabody to build something that had never existed before, a house heated entirely by the sun. The Dover Sun House in Dover, Massachusetts used south-facing solar air collectors to push warm air across bins of Glauber's salt. During the day, the salt melted and stored the heat. At night, the salt refroze and warmed the house. It worked. For 2 full winters, that house ran on sunlight and salt with no backup furnace and no utility bill. Then the salt started to fail. Sodium sulfate decay hydrate has a flaw. It melts unevenly. The heavier anhydrous crystals sink to the bottom and refuse to recombine when the salt refreezes. Cycle after cycle, the storage capacity drops. By the third winter, the bins could no longer hold enough heat, and a conventional furnace was installed. The experiment was over. But here is what matters. The physics was never wrong. The engineering just was not finished yet. By 1980, researchers in Sweden and Germany had solved the problem. A few percent of borax added as a nucleating agent prevents supercooling. A thickening agent like adipolgite clay or carboxymethylcellulose suspends the heavy crystals so they cannot settle. Encapsulation keeps the mixture sealed and uniform. Modern formulations tested at institutions like the Fraunhofer Institute in Germany and the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm have demonstrated stable performance across thousands of charge and discharge cycles. The salt does not wear out, it does not degrade, it just keeps melting and refreezing, storing and releasing heat year after year. Companies like Sunamp in East Lothian, Scotland, and Rubitherm in Berlin, Germany, and Climator in Borås, Sweden sell commercial salt hydrate heat storage units right now to ordinary homeowners. Sunamp's compact heat battery replaces a standard hot water tank in a European home, and it runs entirely on phase change salt. The science was solved decades ago, so why is your house still burning gas? Follow the money backward and you will find the answer sitting in a filing cabinet. In 1977, the United States government created the Solar Energy Research Institute in Golden, Colorado. Federal funding for solar thermal research surged after the oil crisis. President Carter installed solar panels on the White House roof in 1979. The 1978 Energy Tax Act gave homeowners generous tax credits for solar heating systems. For 5 years, it looked like America might actually build houses that heated themselves. Then Ronald Reagan took office. His administration slashed the solar research budget at the Institute in Golden, Colorado. Staff were laid off. Programs were gutted. The federal residential solar tax credit was allowed to expire at the end of 1985. In 1986, Reagan had the solar panels physically removed from the White House roof. Picture that image. Workers on ladders pulling panels off the most visible rooftop in America while cameras rolled. That was not policy, that was a message. At the same time, natural gas prices collapsed. The American Gas Association and the Edison Electric Institute had spent decades shaping building energy codes and ASHRAE standards to center on gas furnaces and electric resistance heat. Passive thermal storage was never written into the International Residential Code. It was never given a compliance pathway in the International Energy Conservation Code. ASHRAE committees with majority representation from HVAC manufacturers evaluated heating systems through a lens that assumed mechanical equipment was the only legitimate approach. There was no vote to ban salt hydrate storage. There did not need to be. They simply never gave it a seat at the table. No funding pathway, no testing standard, no mention in the training materials that licensed contractors study before their exams. A technology that worked was treated as though it had never existed. The residential heating market in the United States generates over $100 billion per year. Every furnace sold, every gas line run, every thermostat installed feeds that number. A sealed barrel of salt that costs $40 and stores heat for decades does not generate recurring revenue. It does not require annual service. It does not need a filter subscription or a warranty upsell. It sits in a corner and works. And that is exactly why you have never heard of it. Now, if you do not own land, if you are not off-grid, if you are sitting in a suburban house or an apartment right now, stay with me. Because what comes next works in any home, costs under $300, and requires 0 permits in most jurisdictions. This part was built specifically for you. Remember what I promised you at the beginning of this video, a house heated through a New England winter on barrels of salt. Here's the part I held back. Those barrels did not just store heat for hours. A properly formulated sealed barrel of sodium sulfate decahydrate with borax nucleator and thickening agent can hold thermal energy across multiple consecutive sunless days. Maria Telkes proved it in 1948. Her system bridged 3 to 4 day gaps between sunny periods in a Massachusetts winter. The salt did not drain like a battery. It held its charge because phase change storage does not lose energy to the environment the way sensible heat does. The temperature sits at the melting point and stays there until every last crystal has refrozen. That is the withheld detail. This is not a system that helps on sunny afternoons. This is a system that carries you through the dark days. Now here is how you build it. You need a food-grade, high-density polyethylene barrel, 55 gallons. You can find them for $15 to $25 at farm supply stores or online. You need sodium sulfate decahydrate. 50 pounds costs roughly $15 to $20 from chemical supply companies. You need borax. A standard box from the laundry aisle costs $5 and you only need 3 to 5% by weight mixed in. You need a thickening agent. Carboxy methyl cellulose powder is available online for under $10 per pound, and you need very little. Mix the sodium sulfate decahydrate with the borax and the thickening agent in the barrel. Seal it tight. This is a closed system. The salt never touches air after you seal it. Place the barrel along an interior south-facing wall where it receives direct sunlight through a window, or position it inside a simple solar air collector. A collector can be built from a sheet of plywood, a sheet of polycarbonate glazing, and flat black paint for under $50. The sun heats the barrel through the day. The salt melts at 89 degrees Fahrenheit, absorbing heat silently with no fan and no pump. At night, the salt refreezes and radiates stored heat back into your room at a slow, steady rate. One barrel stores roughly the equivalent of running a 1,500-watt space heater for 4 to 5 hours. 2 barrels double that. Gerald in Lancaster County runs 5. The total material cost for a single barrel system with collector is under $150. For a 3-barrel system with a larger collector, you are looking at $250 to $300. There are no moving parts, no electricity required, no permits needed in most jurisdictions because you are not altering any structural, electrical, or plumbing system. You are placing a sealed container near a window. One critical warning: this system stores heat. It does not store electricity. You cannot run lights or appliances from it. It offsets your heating bill by absorbing solar heat during the day and releasing it at night and through cloudy stretches. It competes with your gas furnace and your electric space heater, not with your battery bank. Anyone who tells you this replaces lithium-ion storage is confusing two completely different sciences. Be honest about what it does, and it will do it reliably for years. Be honest about what it does not do, and you will never be disappointed. Seal the barrel properly. Use food-grade, high-density polyethylene. Keep the mixture ratio consistent, and check the seal once a year. That is it. Maria Telkes figured out the hard part in 1948. Swedish and German engineers solved the degradation problem by 1980. All that was left was for someone to tell you. The gas company was never going to do that. Your utility provider was never going to do that. So here we are.